Global sea levels could rise by more than a metre by the end of the century, and 5 metres in about 300 years if global emissions targets are not achieved. The projection has been made by more than 100 international experts in a study led by NTU.
Well, for more, we're joined by co-author of the study, Dr. Andra Garner, Assistant Professor of Environmental Science at the Rowan University. Thank you very much, Dr. Garner, for joining us. So remind us again of how global warming, emission levels and sea levels are all connected.
Right. So, we're in a situation where we are emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And the more of that we put into the atmosphere, the warmer our planet becomes. And as our planet warms, we have our sea levels rising for a couple of reasons, including that we are melting ice, like our ice sheets in Antarctica and Greenland, and that our ocean waters expand as they get warmer, among a number of other reasons as well.
So what trends have we been seeing then over the past decade?
Right. So really what we've seen over the past decade is that sea level rise has been accelerating if we look at the global average of how much sea level rises each year. So for example, if we look from the period 1970 up through 2015, sea levels were rising on average 2.1 millimeters per year. But if we look at just 2005 to 2015, we see those sea levels rising by about 3.6 millimeters per year. And that's been a trend that we've seen over the last century, and that we see the sea level rise continuing to accelerate.
So people in governments, they're now more aware of the issues with this sea level rising. It's going to affect coastal countries like Singapore. Is the response to this improving, though?
I think that you're right. We are seeing more awareness for the entire global community about the dangers of climate change, and sea level rise certainly being one of those dangers, especially for our coastal communities. But I think we also still have, in some ways, a long way to go. We really need to be able to coordinate a global response and a global effort where everyone is engaged in actively reducing our carbon emissions and moving away from our dependence on fossil fuels in order to really avoid the potentially kind of worst case scenarios that we look at in a future where we continue to have high emissions.
Well, COVID-19 lockdowns have seen pollution and emissions reduce quite significantly. Do you think there are lots of lessons to be learned there? And also, what do you think is going to happen when things return to normal, or when we get past this pandemic?
Right. I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned there. As you mentioned, we have seen pollution levels decrease as our society has kind of gone into lockdown. We're expecting to see some drop in our carbon dioxide levels. However, without real changes to the way that our society functions, as we move back to functioning as normal as a society, we do expect those pollution levels and carbon dioxide emissions to go back up. But I think one thing that we have learned is that, we are capable of acting as a global community to really confront a crisis. And I think that if we can apply that same effort towards climate change, there's real hope there for us for the future.
But Dr. Garner, so this is an age-old question. How do we fix things?
Right. I think, what we really need to do, and you see this in our recent study that you mentioned from NTU, is that as we look to the future, we have choices that we make right now that are going to impact what the future looks like, whether it's really something where we see drastic amounts of sea level rise that will change the way our societies have to live and where we can live and function, or we can take action now and really reduce the amount of sea level rise that we could see in the future. And so what we need to do is that we need to have a real engagement from the entire global community. We need our governments to really focus on moving towards cleaner energy, moving away from fossil fuels that emit carbon dioxide, so that we can really start to limit how many emissions we're putting into the atmosphere and move away from those very worst climate impacts.
And you're rightly so. It does need a whole global effort for this. But thank you very much for speaking to us. We've been speaking with Dr. Andra Garner, Assistant Professor of Environmental Science at the Rowan University.